So welcome. We'll just let people arrive. And can you hear me okay, those of you who are here? Yeah, great. Okay. So as we're arriving, let's just take a moment of grounding. Really feeling as we're all arriving into the space that coming into our own body, feeling how the body's coming into stillness. And just letting ourselves gather and arrive here, maybe through touching into the breath or feeling the touch of the earth underneath us. Just taking a moment to pause and rest and arrive, however that feels, however that works for us. And also feeling the coming together here, the gathering together of a Sangha, a group of people that we have some kind of shared intention and the support of that. So really welcome everybody. Lovely to see familiar faces as ever and familiar names. And also if there's anybody new here, welcome, deeply welcome. Just to say for anybody new, I'm Sumedha. I'm one of the core teachers with Sacred Mountain Sangha, and I really love these Sunday Sanghas. So thank you for opening the window that I could be here with you. And in terms of structure for this session, it lasts for an hour. The main session lasts for an hour. And there's a time for chanting and for a guided meditation, also for some reflections and teaching. And then after that hour, you're welcome to leave if you wish to. You're also welcome to stay on for another 15 minutes where there'll be questions or sharings. So that's how the session goes. And just to say that this is a 2-week, I'll be offering some reflections this week and the next week on approaching thought, like skillful approaches to thought in meditation. So, and also to mention, I live off-grid in the forest, and so if my internet drops, I do apologize, and I'll come back in a couple of minutes. I just need to restart the system. So. So maybe let's start with some chanting. So Michael, yeah, we're very lucky Michael's with us, and he's going to share the chanting book. And as you know, as many of you know, that chanting is quite honored practice in Sacred Mountain Sangha, and it's a really beautiful way of like both bringing the vibrations of the teachings into our body, of tuning into them in a different way. There's many things that chanting can offer us. So just encouraging you to join in if you wish to, and if not, to just start with the refuges and precepts. So honoring that which is awake within us, honoring the teachings which help us to investigate our experience and how things are, and nature, and honouring also the sense of community and creating a safety in this space with the precepts. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi. Dhammang saranam gacchāmi. Sanghang saranam gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Dhammang saranam gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Sanghang saranam gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Dhammang saranam gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Sanghang saranam gacchāmi. Panatipata vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from intentionally taking life. Adinadana vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kame sumichachara vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from misuse of sexuality and the senses. Musawada vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from speech that is false, divisive, harsh, and meaningless. Suramirayamajapamadhatana vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from intoxication which leads to carelessness. Then we can go to the next page where there's the qualities. Recollection of the triple jewel. So on page 4. Okay. And we'll just chant the Pali, but it's a really nice practice to come back and really contemplate, feel into this within our hearts, and also come and contemplate, read the English and contemplate how that kind of settles in and might touch us in different ways at different times. Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vijat charana sampano dugato lokavidu anutaro purisa dhamma sarati sata deva manusanam bhulato bhagava Tisawakato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko hopanayiko pachatang veditabo vinyuhiti supachipano bhagavato sawakasango Ujjapatipano bhagavato sawakasango Nyayapatipano bhagavato Sawaka Sango Samichi Pachipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sango Yadidam Chatari Purisa Yugania Tapurisa Pugala Esa Bhagavato Sawaka Sango Ahuneyo Pahuneyo Dakineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anutaran Punya Ketam Lokasati. You can go to the 4 boundless qualities. Page 8. And again, this is one of the really ancient chants that's been chanted over ages, and that it can be really beautiful to tune into the cultivation of listening into these boundless qualities and how they might come through in our own being and also come out through into the world through our being. So as we suffuse them in our actions also of body, speech and mind. So I will abide, pervading 1/4 with a heart imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with compassion. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with gladness. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with equanimity. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. And then we can end with the Heart Sutra. So I'm not sure what page that's on. If we go down, I think it's further down, yeah. There we go, Heart of the Prajnaparamita Sutra. Prajnaparamita is a really wonderful figure to contemplate. So she's said to be the perfection. She's meant to represent the perfection of wisdom and to be the mother of the Buddhas. So this is a very profound teaching. And I only know a chant with it that is quite simple, so quite easy to follow, but not very melodic. When Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara was practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, she illuminated the 5 skandhas and saw that they are all empty, and she crossed beyond all suffering and difficulty. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself is form. So too are feeling, cognition, formation, and consciousness. Shariputra, all dharmas are empty of characteristics. They are not produced, not destroyed, not defiled, not pure, and they neither increase nor diminish. Therefore, in emptiness there is no form, feeling, cognition, formation, or consciousness. No eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind. No sight, sound, smells, tastes, objects of touch, or dharmas. No field of the eyes up to and including no field of mind consciousness. And no ignorance or ending of ignorance up to and including no old age and death, or ending of old age and death. There is no suffering, no accumulating, no extinction, and no way, and no understanding, and no attaining. Because nothing is attained, the Bodhisattva, through reliance on Prajnaparamita, is unimpeded in her mind. Because there is no impediment, she is not afraid, and she leaves distorted dream thinking far behind, ultimately nirvana. All Buddhas of the 3 periods of time attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi through reliance on Prajnaparamita. Therefore know that Prajnaparamita is a great spiritual mantra, a great bright mantra, a supreme mantra, an unequaled mantra. It can remove all suffering. It is genuine and not false. That is why the mantra of Prajnaparamita was spoken, recited like this. Gate, gate, arahagate, arasagate, bodhiswaha, gate, gate, arahagate, arasagate, bodhiswaha, gate, gate, arahagate, arasagate, bodhiswaha. Just feeling into the vibrations in your body. Where those chants may resonate or not. Just being aware of this. listening, really listening within our being. Helping our mind to come into our body. Maybe feeling the weight of the body as it settles down towards the earth. And really bringing a care into this attention. We're here to listen and to attend for our deepest well-being and the well-being of the life that we're part of. Feeling if our posture is really supporting us. Maybe it's helpful to lengthen the spine whether we're sitting or lying down. Maybe it's helpful to feel if there's balance as much as possible between one side of our body and the other. Really coming with this sense of like, how can I best support my being to arrive here? We're not judging, listening with a caring attention. And just seeing if we can settle and land a bit with maybe the contact of the earth, or maybe for you the breath is something that helps you to settle. We do this, we can also maybe notice the space around our body. Notice the openness and the gentleness of the space around our body. Space which isn't judging us, it's not asking us to be otherwise. Just giving us room to be here. As we breathe, as we hum with our thoughts and our feelings, maybe. There's room for us here. We tune into any sense of settling or spaciousness. First of all, not judging if that's difficult to contact. It's all right also to just stay with something very simple. Say the weight of the body or the touch of our hands with each other. the space that's here for us. In whatever way we can contact these things, just noticing if then we can kind of let our attention be touched by the space and reminded of our own spaciousness. Maybe feel how our listening can be spacious. Our awareness can hear my voice, the arising and falling in the space. And just notice how we can also notice our thoughts arising and falling in a sense of spacious listening. We don't have to stop thinking, we don't have to judge it, and we don't have to disconnect. We stay settled, stay spacious, and first of all just notice the movement of thought, arising and falling. Sometimes I use the image of an ocean. It'd be helpful to think of evoke an image, say, of awareness like an ocean, and thought is just like a fish coming through, passing through. And with this kind of listening, we can really be curious what color it has, what shape it has, what movement it makes. And we leave it the space to show itself. And maybe a sad thought or a fearful thought that habitually we might contract into, or judge or push away. You're really bringing this loving, spacious awareness and listening. What's this thought like? How does it move? What's it imbued with? What may need to be heard and what can pass on, move on. And as we listen like this, we keep grounding, keep breathing, allowing our presence to be alive and connected. We'll sit just for another minute or so, but really taking in anything that is helpful. We might want to continue to practice with. Allowing anything that isn't resonant to flow on. Really coming back to as much ground and spacious, loving awareness as we can within our being. This stays with us, this way of attending. We can end there. Thank you for your presence. So, as I said at the beginning, I want to give some reflections like this week and next week, which I find quite helpful around like approaching thought skillfully in meditation. So obviously thought is, it's for many of us quite a dominant part of our experience. And I've heard so many people say, I can't meditate because I can't stop thinking. And I feel really grateful for Ajahn Sumedha, who is one of my main teachers, his humor around this, because he would say, like, you know, try not to think pink elephant. And it's like, well, what do? You think pink elephant? Of course you do, you know. It's this is what our thinking mind does. And our thinking mind can of course be really, really useful. But it can get very dominant. So it does feel like we need some skillful tools to work with it. And I live in France, so I'm in the south of France. And here, of course, there was Descartes who said, I think, therefore I am, which is like possibly pretty far from the Buddha's teaching. But I thought it's like this is where how far we go with our thought, that we it can really create a lot of identity. And we can get very stuck in it and very stuck in cycles with it, clearly. But this is exactly why I think it's really helpful that it's not something that is just rejected in meditation, but that we're finding how to approach it in a way that we can have a different perspective on it. We can start to discern what is useful, and also ways in which it might actually be able to support meditation up to a certain point. Because the thinking mind can be really a very powerful doorway, as we know. So like there's this model in practice that Ajahn Chah talked about, of like, you know, study, practice, realization, and then being Dharma. So, and as I think with many of the teachings, this isn't for me a linear thing. It's kind of, they turn around each other. So like when I first went to the monastery, I'd studied comparative religion really hard for 3 years. And like I was really tired of reading and of ideas. And so I was librarian, and I decided I wasn't going to read anything apart from the back of the books to classify them in the library. And so I stopped reading for a few years. And that was really, really good in a certain way, because it was like, well, I want to listen to what I kind of want to come to something from within my own experience. And that was really important. It was a really important period for me. And then it was also really important for me to be able to come back to reading and study from a different place, from a place of like, well, how do I sense this? How does this resonate? So like in a way, a less mimicking place in myself. And I think this is can be interesting to explore, these possibilities within our being. So I do think that there is a really important place in meditation for learning to come away from thinking. And I'll say probably more about this next week, because it's almost like we can deepen in other ways of knowing if we find some space with thinking. And I think that is very, very important. And yet the power of thought in our being is what makes it interesting to look into. How can we harness this? How can we come to it in a way that is helpful? So, and actually there's quite some beautiful guidelines in the early teachings around this. So I want to share some of those. So this week I thought to look into one text which gives us some very clear ground for the place of thought, and also maybe some how to approach it in a way that is supportive for our being and our process of discernment and our freedom. And then next week, I thought to look more into like specific ways of working with thought that can help us have a perspective on it, ways we might want to cultivate certain qualities or explorations with thought. And this can really support our meditation. So that's basically how I'm going to split it up. And so the first teaching I want to look into this week is from an early text, which is called Two Sorts of Thinking. And you'll get this text afterwards. So, and as I'm speaking about it, I think it's a quite interesting exercise to take it in via our thoughts and feel how those are connecting in our being. So it's not just the thoughts running off and going into a discursive kind of blah, as we do, but like connected thinking. So how are we feeling this? How are we sensing into this? So at the start of this sutta, one thing I really like is the Buddha says, like, well, why not look into thinking? It's like, it's an interesting area. And so he says, before my self-awakening, when I was still just an unawakened bodhisattva, the thought occurred to me. So he's having a thought about thinking. Why don't I keep dividing my thinking into two sorts? So I made thinking imbued with sensuality, imbued with ill will, and imbued with harmfulness one sort. And thinking imbued with renunciation, thinking imbued with non-ill will, and thinking imbued with harmlessness, another sort. So already there's something very interesting for me here, because it's not just like, well, we discard thought. Like here, he's already tuning into what is the thinking imbued with? What is the tone? Where's it coming from? The sense that a thought can have a particular flavor and a direction. And I think this is something really, really helpful to tune into. And there's already an awareness here. We're already somewhat less identified when we're starting to be able to notice that. And it's also interesting that the approach to it, he's like, well, a thought occurred to me. Why don't I look at my thinking in this way? And so for me, there's something about how we approach our thinking that can be like, well, it's a deepening path. We can use a thought to help ourselves to deepen, and the thinking process to be a reflective one. And I think this is very interesting because it's so not polarized. It's like, how do we discern? How do we have a discerning approach? And that starts with, oh, well, why don't I look at my thought? Why don't I look at my thinking like this? So I think that's interesting. And he goes on to really notice that as we ground, a bit like we were doing in that meditation, we can notice the thought arising and we can notice its tone, which is, again, very different from just like, I just jump on the train. It's like boom, boom, boom. So he says, as I remained heedful, he notices thinking imbued with sensuality arose in me. And then he notices the effect of that. So he says, I discerned that thinking imbued with sensuality has arisen in me, and that leads to my own affliction. to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both. It obstructs discernment, it promotes vexation, and it does not lead to unbinding. So for me, this is a really, really important passage, because it's like, as I said, as we ground and we remain attentive, we can notice thought arising. So hopefully you've been noticing that. We can notice its tone, and we can notice its effect. And he's not wishy-washy about that. He says, if it leads to affliction, he says that we notice if it leads to affliction or difficulty. We notice if it promotes discernment or not. Does it, and this lovely turn in unbinding, does it promote disentanglement, clear understanding, non-affliction? So he's not neutral about this. He's like, notice the tone, notice the thought arising, notice its tone, and notice where it takes it. So for me, this is really, it's really, really good stuff, and it's not dogmatic. So when he says thoughts imbued with sensuality, like immediately our thinking polarizing tendency can go, oh, well, all sensuality out, or all sensuality in, we've got an opinion about it. And as many as you know, I'm not a fan of condemning the senses. I think but there's a yes to questioning them in this way. Is the way that we're engaging leading to opening, or is it leading to affliction? Is it leading to discernment, to a sense of freedom, or is it leading to a sense of grasping and closing down? And I think these are powerful questions to pose within our being as we're with our thinking processes. So yeah, I think that's really important. And then he has another interesting observation. So he says, as I noticed that this thought, say, of sensuality or of ill will or of harmfulness, which is the three things he talks about in the things to not cultivate. He says, as I noticed that this thought imbued with sensuality or with ill will or harmfulness, as I noticed that it leads to my own affliction, it subsided. As I noticed that it leads to the affliction of others, to the affliction of both, it obstructs discernment, promotes vexation, and does not lead to unbinding. It subsided. So I think this is really, really important as well, because when we come into grounding and we come into an alignment and we come into a true sense of listening, we notice the effect of our thoughts from a conscious place. Something in us does not want to harm the life we're part of. It wants to come into balance. So I know Gulu last week was teaching about Sila ethics, and I think this is one of the major, haven't listened to what he said, I want to, but I think this is one of the main routes into like our ethical awareness, actually. Something in us, if we're grounded, if we're aligned, and we notice that our thoughts are causing affliction or promoting harm, promoting entanglement, it's like something in us can come out of that. So what he says is just that as he notices this, it subsides. Or sometimes more consciously, we need to work to let it go. So he says he dispels it. But something in us knows that we don't want to cause harm, and also knows what is truly good for us. So there's this lovely simile from Ajahn Sucitto in his book on the parami that says our wisdom, it's a bit like a raccoon who picks up, it knows the difference between a clam and a rock. And our wisdom knows the difference between what is harmful, what is causing entanglement and difficulty, or affliction to others, affliction to our own being. Something in us knows that, and it also knows what is for our well-being if we can listen deeply. And what's interesting for me in this teaching is that we're encouraged to include our thinking processes in this discernment. So we do need to ground, we do need to make space, and then we can use our discerning capacity in this way. And again, Ajahn Chah on this subject, he says we need to really experience this deeply. So he says it's not until we truly see the harmfulness of our actions that we can give them up. Likewise, it's not until we truly see the real benefits of practice that we can follow it and begin working to help the mind to come into balance, to help it cultivate that which is wholesome. So there's something about the way this reflection on thought is both with the level of thoughts, what it's imbued with, what effects it has, and how it calls us into a deep place of discernment within our being. That is asking us to truly taste into our experience. And this, of course, relates to right view, which is the first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. And as I say, I think these teachings, it's like as we establish a deeper view, a more connected view, a more awake view of our being that is linked with non-harming, with non-affliction, as the Buddha's saying in this teaching. It's like then our actions, our thoughts, everything weaves back through there in a different way. It almost transforms the matter of our being, what kind of thoughts are going to arise. So when we're more connected, we're more established in that intention of not cultivating careless grasping with the senses or harmfulness or ill will. So our sense of who and what we are and how we want to act in this world actually changes. So then, I mean, I just find this sutta amazing. Then he says, so whatever a monk or nun or layperson keeps pursuing with their thinking and pondering, that becomes the inclination of their awareness. So it sounds so simple, but it's that thing of recognize what we cultivate in our thoughts. It digs a channel. So it's again this really importance of finding ground, finding space, not being entangled in our thoughts, in our habitual ways. But at some point we need to work with them because our thinking is going to happen. And as it comes from a deeper place within ourselves, we're deepening the channels of what we wish to cultivate or what we wish to let go of. So he says, if a monk keeps pursuing thinking, for instance, imbued with harmfulness, or abandoning thinking imbued with harmfulness, his mind is bent in that way. It's like that's pretty accurate, I find. It's like when we keep cultivating a certain way of thinking, our mind is like, it just keeps going there, doesn't it? It's like, that's what I'm going to filter things through. And so it's really precious to bring an awareness in the way that the Buddha is suggesting here, without judging. So all this can be without judging, but with discernment. Is this promoting affliction? Is it promoting well-being? Is it promoting discernment? Is it promoting difficulty and entanglement, or is it promoting a certain freedom of heart and connectedness of heart? And then he's very thorough. So he's been through in this teaching, he goes through the 3 areas which we might want to look into as not so helpful in our thoughts. So kind of unconscious sensuality, ill will and harmfulness. And then he says, what do we want to cultivate? He kind of moves into what do we want to cultivate. So he says then thinking imbued with renunciation, he notices that thinking imbued with renunciation arises. And he notices the effect again, that leads neither to my affliction, the affliction of both. It fosters discernment, it promotes lack of vexation, and it leads to unbinding. And then he says there's no danger in this. So again, like not to close down around the term renunciation, but to explore what kind of thoughts as say I'm relating to the sensory world, what kind of relationship leads to non-affliction? So for me, again, it's coming back into this deep sense of listening and connecting with life. And how do I want to relate in a way that is honoring that, is not causing harm, not causing affliction, that's honoring the life we're part of and has a freedom to explore a response. Yeah. So there's a lovely Tibetan teaching actually where renunciation is talked about as definite emergence. And it's talked about as a deep, heartfelt decision, definitely to emerge from the repeated frustrations and disappointments of ordinary life. So we're really searching for another way to bring meaning and to honor the sacredness of life. So it's related for me with the teachings on urgency in the Theravadan's teaching and Pasada, which is a kind of recognition that we can come to something more wholesome. So it's not a should, it's an invitation to deepen in our being. So he goes through then the qualities of cultivating, noticing thoughts that are arising that are imbued with renunciation or with non-ill will or with harmlessness. And he says these don't need notice, these don't lead to affliction. So this is a really interesting way of engaging with our own thought processes. Notice if I'm having a thought that is one of really wishing for the well-being of another being, really wishing to connect with their experience and support their well-being, does that lead to affliction or does it lead to discernment? So we can reflect in this way within ourselves. And then in this sutta, so I don't have that much time, but you will receive the sutta. So in this sutta, he then talks about that the only disadvantage of constantly working with thought of these thoughts of renunciation, harmlessness, non-ill will, is that the mind becomes tired when it's thinking. So then he goes into actually jhana practice, where the first part of it is we use directed thought and we use thought which can feel things out, but then we move to spaces more of equanimity, of stilling, and resting. But then what is really beautiful for me here is that he talks about then that what happens is that he comes into a space of knowledge within his being. So he's been observing the thinking processes, he's been refining them so that they're in alignment with his deepest values. And then he's come into a state of resting. And then he has these knowledges which emerge of the knowledge of past lives, the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings, and the knowledge of the ending of like the mental bubbling, so the Four Noble Truths. And for me, what this speaks to is how, as we start to be aware of thought in the way that hopefully there's some resonance in it here, as we start to be aware of thought in this way, and we start to come to rest and take care of our thoughts, so to cultivate that which is wholesome, to let go of that which is causing harm, what happens is that there's like a different vision within our being. So there's a really lovely teaching as well on it's called the 8 streams of merit or 8 streams of blessing, which is just the 5 refuges and precepts. But Kittisaro talks about this as a change of alignment when we come from this deep place of awakeness and wishing to cultivate non-harm. There's a change of alignment and we have a different vision of life. So when the Buddha talks about these visions, for me, there's something he's recognizing interdependence. He's recognizing that there's cause and effect. And he's recognizing that there's the creation of suffering and there's the possibility of ending suffering. So he's giving us he's what he's sharing for me is the possibility of this deepening vision and our own responsibility within our being to start to meet our thinking processes with this level of interest that can help us to deepen. And then he could just say, oh, well, and then I was free, which he was. But what he says is, what he wants to share is a path, so the Noble Eightfold Path, which, as I said, as we deepen in our vision, then our thoughts are changed, our actions are changed, our way of wishing to have a livelihood is changed, etc., etc. And this circles around itself in the way that I hope I've explained a little bit. And then very simply, as Michael quoted in the send out today, there's this sense of like, as we're taking care of our deep being, as we're taking care of the channels of our thoughts, we're listening and discerning what is for affliction or what is for well-being, and what is for the affliction of others or what is for the well-being of others. So this is a very connected vision. In the Dhammapada, it just says, phenomena are preceded by the heart, ruled by the heart, made of the heart. And so where our vision is coming from, how our thoughts are cultivated, has a very real effect. And we can really help to liberate ourselves or also meet the suffering of others with this approach. So I'll end with a quote from John O'Donoghue that many of you know I love, Irish philosopher, that relates to this. So he says, the way you look at things is not simply a private matter. Your outlook actually and concretely affects what's going on. When you take back your power and choose to see the possibilities for healing and transformation, your creativity awakens and flows to become an active force of renewal and encouragement in the world. In this way, in your own hidden life, so in this way, how we're coming to meet our thoughts with discernment and depth, in this way, in your own hidden life, you become a powerful agent of transformation in a broken and darkened world. There is a huge force field that opens when intention focuses and directs itself towards transformation. And so just to drop in the seeds that our thinking can be a really precious part in this, actually. So I'll end there, and anything that was helpful, please take it with you, and anything that isn't, let it go. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence, your practice. And just to say, so there'll be 15 minutes now for anyone who wants to stay on for